Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us here on another JSRA Saturday. This is round 2 of our multi-cup series, and alongside me is Mr. Cale Vaden Roper. Well, not physically alongside me, as you can see, I'm the only one on screen, but he is here virtually with us. Cale, good evening.
Yes, here is We're going to have a lot to talk about again tonight here, this time around Long Beach Grand Prix circuit. 3.1 kilometers of tight, twisted road circuit. It's going to be
Kale, give me 1 second because I don't think everybody else is hearing you. Let me just validate something here. Kale, say something?
testing.
Go
Testing
again.
1 2, testing 1 2.
Alright, you should be good there now. Okay, apologies there, folks. Small hiccup. But yes, Kale, as you were giving your brilliant introduction, which did not go through to the fans, you can go again.
Right. So, as Chad said, not there physically, but I do still have the honor of sharing the commentary box with our host with the most, Chad Dillon. And Chad, I think we're going to have a lot to talk about again tonight here around Long Beach Racing Circuit. It's the Grand Prix layout, and it's going to be 3.1 kilometers of tight, twisty, narrow street circuit racing here in, I believe this is in Miami.
No,
So,
California, but
It's in
yes,
California.
yes,
My bad.
no problem. But yes, you are correct. It is tight and twisty, so tight in fact that you will not be seeing the drivers run off track. Why? Because any off-track incidents result in a wall. So certainly there will be much to watch out for here this evening, as the drivers will have their hands full navigating this course and making sure that they keep it out of the walls, because that is certainly a recipe for disaster for your race and the implications thereafter. 10 turns, 3.1 kilometers. Should be fun racing action, and I guess this is now where the multi-class factor comes into play even heavier, because drivers can't dive off track to get out of the way, so you certainly have to figure out where to get by them in a manner that is most convenient.
It's going to there's basically one racing line in this track in certain parts, and it seeing as though it's so tight, that so narrow rather, the drivers will not have to worry about cutting the track. But at the same time, if you do cut the track, that is in a wall, as I said, straight into a wall. There is no runoff, there is no track limit, it's just wall. And some of these walls can actually, quote unquote, grab you if you get too close. We saw during the practice session, Mark Eaton there, going through turns 3 and 4, getting really close to the wall, but ended up making just a bit of contact there. And it shows that the drivers are all pushing to the absolute extremes of the grip of that their tires will allow. So we're watching Rahul Nasir here in the BMW M2 on his first flying lap.
Absolutely, and these laps, that good slide there coming out of that corner. Yeah, certainly we will be watching to see what the differences we're getting in the times are. I believe there's about 4 seconds in it around this track, if I'm not mistaken.
It's exactly 4 seconds almost. We saw in practice 124s from the Lancer class drivers and 128s from the BMW M2s. Only 4 seconds.
Absolutely. So certainly we will be watching to see what the drivers are capable of throughout.
Sorry.
I think I'm streaming through this.
I was going to say, there's Rahul there making his way across the line, coming out of the final corner, getting a bit squirrely there, a little bit of contact with the wall on the exit, but he manages to cross the line successfully, doing a 128.7. That is keeping in line with what we were seeing in practice. Not too close down a time. So for the time being, BMW drivers are on top.
Absolutely, and Nicholas followed somewhere on the circuit with a barrier, and we will certainly be seeing a lot of those notifications as we roll through this session. But yes, certainly we are looking for Lance some more contact being made that will part on the exit of turn 4. Yeah, certainly we're going to see lots of that happening. Rahul Nazir already at the top of the timing sheets, and we did get a promise of an ongoing rivalry between himself and one Roger Robinson, who's currently 1.7 seconds behind, and I'm sure that will change as the drivers get their tires warmed up, get their bearings about them, and get the setup correctly. There seems to be pushing that car at the moment this track.
Roger Robinson living up stepping up to the plate. 100ths of a second even though the track is at its optimum, consider that more left to squeeze during the qualifying sessions, especially because the drivers will be running their points they're going to change that car to make sure it's ready for one lap. But yes, they would have been doing more long sessions. You're going to definitely see drivers possibly dip into the 127s as you see that 10.
So to clarify what's happening there again is the drivers are certainly sorry.
Section, cutting it close there with the walls, coming around turn 4, moving to the left hand side to open up that corner as best as possible, getting right up against the wall, heading into turn 5, I believe it is, just making a bit of contact there as he on exits, trying to put the power down, but that rear wheel drive M2 wants to get away, heading into turn 7 now, cutting that corner as much as possible, running out wide to keep that momentum up. 4/10 down, however, not quite making as much progress as he would have liked. Heading now down the stretch, the sea sideways stretch as we approach the Firestone turn, world renowned for the Formula Drift popularity it has received this year. He is absolutely utilizing all of the track, coming around the 9th corner, 2/10 up in the middle sector,
but lost too much time in the first sector. Apologies, Kale, as I was trying to get some audio issues sorted out here, but yeah, hopefully the audio is now coming through clearly to the listeners in the chat. But what's happening, Kale, is that the 2 qualifying sessions have been separated. So there is a 10-minute quali session in progress now for the M2 Cup drivers, followed by a 10-minute quali session for the Lancer Cup drivers. So that is why we have not seen any of those drivers out on track at the moment. These drivers need to complete their quali runs in their M2s, and then you will see the Lancer Cup shootout for their top spot in the qualifying session, which I think that was a smart move by El Presidente, just to make sure that, you know, as this is a very tight track, you could catch drivers at very awkward positions. So definitely would be sensible to separate them. But Roger Robinson here going quite nicely in sector 1, almost 4/10 up on the best time overall. So we will look to see what he does throughout the remainder of the lap. Last time around he was quick in sector 2. Let's see if he can match that here as he progresses through the sector 2 of this lap, and we will observe as he is coming to the end of sector 2. Well, has come to the end of sector 2. Ooh, and that is not where you want to make that contact. Having been 6-7 tenths up through 2 sectors, that's now gonna unravel the entirety of his lap there, that contact with the wall in turn 10. That is rather unfortunate because that lap had so much promise there, Cale.
But here he is, 20 seconds left in his qualifying portion of this session here. He is trying once more to, if he can get it all correct, he will definitely be moving up the order. Currently, as it stands, it's Rahul Nasir on pole position in his class, Rajay Robinson in second, Davil Park in third, and Nicholas Donald in fourth. But Rajay Robinson, not comfortable with that second place, is absolutely pushing it. He has done a personal best in the first sector, but is still 2 tenths off the blistering lap time that Rahul Nasir had set. A 1:28.0. Can he do it?
And he is the only M2 driver still on circuit. All of the other drivers, now all of the Lancer Cup drivers are coming out. Rajay Robinson has a few corners left to complete his lap, just turns 9 and 10 to go. And through turn 9 we should get sector 2's time, and he is not quite quick enough, and he will have to abandon this lap, go back to the pits and resort to starting from second position. Clearly he has the pace to go faster, but at this particular stage of the game we will have to wait for him to do that in the race, to take that fight to Rahul Nasir. Now on to the Lancer Cup drivers and their qualifying session. The first man out on track, well, they're all out on track, but the lead car is that of
Luis Daniel Velez,
Indeed.
Representing the Sim Racing Venezuela Sim organization. He comes around the final corner and begins his lap. Chad, would you like to take us through this lap?
Oh, sure, I can attempt to do so. I won't do it justice, but I will try, as he goes through the right-hander there of turn 1. Not really a turn, as it is flat out as you cross start finish. Getting into the braking zone of turn 2, down to second gear through the corner, back on power quickly, but then right back on the brakes through the turn 3 complex. On the run down now, straighten up the car, turn 4, quick turn in, and he makes contact there through turn 4, going into turn 5 now. That lap will be abandoned, so we will check in on Mr. Musk, who is also on his lap and also makes contact at turn 4. What is going on with turn 4? These drivers either do not have the tires quite warmed up just yet, or there is a bit of understeer going on in their setups. This is Jaden Harrison now on the way to turn 6, and that should be a very straightforward almost 90-degree right-hand turn, and then flat out on the run down to turn 7, or am I a turn behind? I think he's on the run to turn 8 at the moment. My apologies. And cuts the corner quite drastically, I must say, to get the maximum out of that turn in, and then keeps the car tucked in very nicely through turn 9 to open up turn 10. Back on the power on the run down to the line, and we will see if Jaden Harrison will be the first driver to post a representative time, or is that his outlap? And it is a 1:24.849, followed by Kurt Moss, who did not abandon that lap. So he comes through on a 1:25, but we will look for these drivers to go a lot quicker, as there seems to have been some issues with the, dare I say, the understeer in turn 4 there. A lot of drivers making contact with that corner, and Jaden Harrison now does it as well. These drivers are struggling, maybe getting a little too aggressive, trying to put the power back on through turn 4, and they seem to be suffering because of it. I don't know, it looks quite aggressive for these drivers here, trying to get the most out of this lap.
I was just about to say it, Chad. You call it understeer. I call it pushing as hard as humanly possible. All of these drivers in the Lancer Cup class know that 123s are attainable, and the likes of Estefano Barrera as well as Jaden Harrison will be pushing to achieve that time, because we know how absolutely close it is between all the drivers in the Lancer Cup class, especially seeing as how narrow this track is. It's reminiscent of Monaco. You know, qualifying is everything. Track position is everything, and so drivers will be pushing as hard as possible. So if it's even to move up one place, it could make all the difference come race time. As you see, Estefano Barrera here, having had a 100 km/h collision on his first outlap, now seems to have tidied things up. A tenth up on Stephen Pommels, who had set a 124.6. Barrera here set to take pole position, or pole position for the time being, as he comes through turn 8 heading into turn 9, the long left-hander. Can he spot his braking marker adequately, fling the car into the final corner and blast down the front stretch, coming across the line a bit down in sector 2, but what will his time be?
Certainly these drivers are pushing to get the maximum out of the car possible, and I don't know if it's the time to bring it up, but Jaden Harrison and Mark Anthony Eaton, once again separated by about a tenth of a second. These two drivers are like magnets. Ooh, Estefano Barrera there having a massive collision in the turn 3 complex and has to teleport back to the pits to get going again, as Jaden Harrison is now coming through to try and improve upon his time, as he is now approaching turn 4. Let's see if he keeps it out of the barrier this time around. It looks like he does, and maybe on for a better lap here is Jaden Harrison, on the run now down to turn 6, my apologies, and goes through that corner nicely there, cutting as much as he can to open up the corner the best way possible through the 90-degree turn 7, on the run now down to turn 8, and we will observe what his lap time is as he crosses the line, because we're not getting the sector times here on screen at the moment. Let's see if I can spot it. Mark Anthony Eaton has moved to the top of the timing sheets by about 0.2 of a second, so we will see if that wills Jaden on to match Mark Anthony Eaton, as he is now on the run down to the line, and as he goes across.
I think that may have been his outlap, Chad.
Oh, it seems that way.
But he was, we couldn't tell the difference. He was pushing, whether he's on an outlap, in-lap, or a fast lap. Jaden Harrison is known to be pushing. Absolutely. And here he is now, getting the rear brakes just locked up a bit, trying to thread the needle here through turn 3, maximize that exit speed there, coming into turn 4. Miss the wall on exit to turn into turn 5. Don't get too caught up on the curbs on the inside. It will throw you wide into the wall, but he manages to get through there clearly. Coming down now into turn 6. Heavy on the brakes, spotted turning in point. He is half a tenth up on the best time in the first sector. Can he keep this lap clean and force himself on the top spot of the podium? Only 2 minutes left in qualifying, coming down into turn 7.
I must say, I find Kurt Moss to be very out of position here. A second down on the best time. These drivers seem to be struggling in this qualifying session. And as Jaden Harrison goes through turn 10, the final turn, I was wondering if that driver was going to hold him up, but that driver has dived into the pits, and Jaden Harrison was 0.2 down in sector 2, but finds it in sector 3 and puts himself at the top of the timing sheet by almost exactly 1/100th of a second. Very little to separate him from Mark Anthony Eaton, and once again these two drivers will just bind themselves together on track. Jaden and his arch nemesis Mark. It's just
and Kurt Moss as well, separated only by about a half a second from Estefano Barrera, who absolutely brought the race to him last time out around VIR. I believe there may be another rivalry here brewing on track between Kurt Moss and Estefano Barrera, but Kurt Moss moves himself up into the second slot on the grid, only 700ths behind Jaden Harrison. With less than a minute to go, drivers will have one more shot at dethroning Jaden, who sits very precariously on provisional pole, Chad.
I mean, the top three separated by less than a tenth of a second, that just lends itself to brilliant racing if it is to come to that. But as you mentioned before, track position is important on a street circuit. Overtaking not the easiest task around any street circuit, but certainly, I mean, there are some opportunities. I think the track is not so narrow that two drivers cannot go through some of these turns, but certainly any move that will be made has to be made somewhere in the region of turn 7, 8, or before turn 2. I don't think after turn 2 there is much room to make any moves throughout sector 1. So,
but Chad, Estefano about to come across the line, fastest in the first sector. Estefano,
and
he crosses the line.
100th of a second separates the top two. Jaden Harrison had gone faster. I didn't catch that. He did a 124.1, and Estefano Barrera matches him almost to the 100th. There is literally exactly 100 separating them, and that would be the end of the qualifying session. Jaden Harrison still on a flyer. I mean, he is on pole at this point because all of the other drivers have given up, but maybe stamping his authority here on the race this evening, still going faster still, maybe trying to find that 123 that we said was possible. He is still on track to do so based on his first two sectors. So just the final sector to go now, and will he do it just to say, here I am, catch me if you can? And he does.
And he does. Jaden Harrison absolutely showing the rest of the grid, Chad, that he is the man to beat tonight here around Long Beach. Absolutely amazing qualifying session there from all the drivers. Oh my goodness. What was it? You said 100 separating the top two until Jaden decided that that's a bit too close for comfort.
I think that's what his thinking was there. Certainly he thought, you know what, let me just show that there's a bit more in the bag, and I will just let these drivers know that there's work to do in order to catch me here this evening. So the Lancer Cup drivers all the way down to P7, Jaden Harrison on pole from Estefano Barrera, 2.5-ish tenths behind. Kurt Moss a further 4 tenths back, almost directly on pace with one Mark Anthony Eaton, and followed by Stephen Pommel's 2 tenths down from those two drivers, followed by, well, how did Rahul Nazir end up? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong class. But yes, Daniel Velez rounds out, well, is P6, and Kimani Eastman rounds out the Lancer Cup class. So we will get going racing in a moment, ladies and gentlemen, and we will see what these drivers have in store for us here this evening around the streets of Long Beach, California. So, Kale, taking wagers at this stage of the game, what do we expect to get out of these drivers here this evening? Jaden Harrison looks like the man to beat, but certainly there is some amount of closeness behind him, with the exception of Estefano Barrera, who might be right there with him. But from Kurt Moss to Stephen Pommel, separated by about 2 tenths of a second. It's actually about 1.5 tenths realistically. So there is lots of action to unfold here this evening between these drivers. Mark Anthony Eaton and Kurt Moss separated by very little, so we can look for them to get racy through turn 1 into turn 2. Turn 2 really is where it will all unfold for these rivals on lap 1. But as the popular saying goes, you can finish up for me there.
Well, there's quite a few things I could choose from because the drivers will be starting 2 wide and 2 into 1 does not go. So we're definitely going to see who will back out first, heading into the first overtaking zone, which is turn 2. And I was going to say, Chad, that I'm actually going to be keeping my eyes on Stephen Pommels, known to be the aggressor in majority of the situations where we have 2 drivers battling. He will be definitely putting the pressure on Mark heading into turn 2, the first heavy braking zone. And we may see Kimani Eastman, usually very conservative on opening laps to keep himself clean. He may capitalize on any carnage that we see up there at the front. I think Jaden is going to take it away quite cleanly. And the top 3, I think they're going to just run away with this race and have their own battle towards the latter stages. So right now I'm looking at Mark, Stephen, Luis, and Kimani for the real action.
Absolutely. As we're about to get going, we're on board with Jaden Harrison. As we got going, remember the M2 drivers will not get going until the countdown goes off for them. 15 seconds, I believe it is. But as we're heading to turn 2, Jaden Harrison finds himself behind Estefano Barrera, who has the inside, and Estefano Barrera comes out of turn 2 in the lead. Jaden Harrison, the aggressor, takes it back through the turn 3 complex. On the way to turn 4, Estefano and Jaden gave us a good little first corner battle there for the lead of this race. Kurt Moss comes through in third, and they have all lined up and are going one after the other down the straightaway into turn 6. As we're going through lap 1 here, the M2 drivers should now have gotten going, and the race is on. We will catch up with them later as Jaden Harrison made some heavy contact there.
Accident there at the front of the grid. Jaden Harrison had gotten away quite cleanly, having fallen to second position and moving back up to first, but making a big mistake there. This may be a safety car, Chad Dillon, as we see the drivers slowing down. Absolutely massive accident there. Jaden Harrison just running a bit too wide and the wall just grabbing him like we had spoken about before. These walls are serrated in nature, and if you run too wide, you will make contact. Disaster there for Jaden, as we do have damage on for this race. He will be struggling with a damaged car unless he and others who were involved in that incident, unless they will take a pit stop and change tires, fix the vehicle, depending on how bad the damage is. But Mark Anthony Eaton there, capitalizing on disaster, is now sitting at the front of the field. Luis Daniel Velez now in P2, and Kurt Moss somehow avoiding that carnage there into turn 7.
Carnage is the word, Kale, as Mark Anthony Eaton somehow got through. We did call him the man with the horseshoe because he has a way of keeping himself out of trouble that, you call it luck, but at some point you have to give him his credit where it is due. He does manage to find himself in the prime position more often than not, coming out of incidents like this one. So Mark Anthony Eaton will lead us at the end of this safety car period from Daniel Velez. And this is now the closing up of the grid throughout the remainder of this lap. And we will get going racing again at the end of this, which should be lap 2. And my goodness, the first lap, I mean, it did give us some action. Certainly it looked like the fight was on between Jaden Harrison and Estefano Barrera, but Jaden Harrison losing it in turn 7, I believe that was, causing a massive pile-up right here where we are now riding along with Mark Anthony Eaton. And that has drastically changed the order Jaden Harrison finds himself down in P6, only ahead of Kimani Eastman, while Estefano Barrera right there with him, ahead of him in P5. So Mark Anthony Eaton leads from Luis Daniel Velez, and Kurt Moss in third place will certainly be looking to get involved in this action as urgently as possible. So
And
as
we have the BMW class drivers now have caught up, and they may get in the mix here as they're fighting their own race. Rahul Nasir still on pole, still at the front of the grid for his class, followed closely by Roger Robinson. As it looks like we're getting going, there's another bit of contact there with the M2 class, Kimani Eastman and Roger Robinson.
and
Getting
some
a
of
bit
the
tangled there.
M2 drivers look to have gotten ahead of a few of the Lancer Cup drivers, and I'm not sure how that's going to play out. But Mark Anthony Eaton leads us away here on lap 3, ahead of Daniel Velez, and Kurt Moss behind will be looking to get involved. There seems to be a bit of a gap forming here, as there's a gap between the top 3 and Estefano Barrero down in 4th. I'm not sure if maybe he got a little bit caught out at the restart here, but Daniel Velez all over the back of Mark Anthony Eaton, and Eaton no stranger to a pressure situation. Sometimes it works out for him, other times it does not, so you will see if he can manage to subdue the pressure this time around, because I do think he has a little more pace than Daniel Velez behind him. So if he manages to just ward off this initial fight and get settled in the car, he should be okay, as Daniel Velez is doing him a favor, dare I say, in keeping Kurt Moss at bay at the moment, so that the fight is not with Kurt Moss, as he should be a little bit quicker than Velez. As we now get on to lap 4, lap 3 just ending, 126s for these drivers with the exception of Kurt Moss, and Kurt Moss is all over Daniel Velez and looks to make that move into turn 2, picking the wider line, which may give him the inside. No, he thinks better and backs out. Maybe not the time to try and make that move stick. But if these two start fighting behind Eaton, it will certainly give him a chance to run away with this race here this evening, and we can observe that as we go. Rahul Nazir, comfortably ahead in his class, is actually running ahead of Jaden Harrison and Kimani Eastman. And once again, poor Kimani Eastman getting caught up in the M2 drama. This is not the first time this has happened to him, and I am not sure how it is that he managed to get caught up behind these drivers, as Jaden Harrison now clears the last of them and has some work to do here this evening to get back into the fight up ahead. But still
12 seconds between them, Chad. Jaden Harrison has 12 seconds to make up on Stephen Pommel's ahead. And we saw Kurt there heading down into turn 3. It would have been the very same move that Jaden Harrison used to retake that lead position on the first lap. He went around the outside, but the outside became the inside for turn 3, and Kurt Moss now sitting in the double slipstream behind Mark Anthony Eaton and Luis Daniel Velez. Estefano Barrera behind, setting the fastest lap, quickly snatched up by Stephen Pommels.
yeah,
Daniel now trying to make a move, Chad. He was very close there. The top 3 managing to keep it clean, as we see an exchange of positions in the M2 class. David Park was momentarily overtaken by Roger Robinson. Roger Robinson seems to have gotten it done now, side by side, heading into the second corner, heading down into Toyota turn. But was that Kimani Eastman getting it all wrong and taking out Roger Robinson at the same time.
Not
this
what
narrow
we
track is claiming its
here.
victims.
It absolutely is, but not what we expected to see from Roger Robinson here this evening. Getting it all wrong in his fight with Rahul Nazir. So he also has some work to do here this evening. As we look back at the lead cars, still nothing to separate them. Kurt Moss and Daniel Velez. Mark Anthony might be opening up the gap slightly here over this lap, which should be the 4th lap of the race. And I think this fight is playing drivers like Estefano Barrera and Stephen Pommels back into the equation, because even though a slight margin had opened up, they are certainly closing up as Stephen Pommels goes even quicker with a 124.7 than anybody else out front. And I'm not
here's
sure.
Kurt Moss moving around the outside, but Luis Daniel Velez closes the door. No, thank you. I'll keep second position, says Velez, as Jaden Harrison on his child from the back of the field sets the fastest lap of 124.6. Jaden Harrison not missing about at all. He has already closed down that gap from 12 seconds now down to just 11. 5/10 in each lap. He will have to move a little bit faster than that if he hopes to take that 5th position from Stephen Pommels in the remainder of this race. Only 30 minutes to go. Absolutely. And Mark Anthony Eaton, 5 laps in, 1.5 seconds almost clear from the 2 Titans fighting behind. It looks like he's running away with this race, Chad.
Yeah, and as predicted when the fighting started, that's his time to shine. I mean, he just needs to get going, keep it clean, run his race, do his laps, keep the time up, and he should be good to go. The 2 drivers behind him are going to be tooth and nail trying to gain track position, and it's now 4. All 4 drivers.
I'd say it's now 5. Oh my goodness. 1, 2, 3. Wait, is there a 5th one around there? Am I seeing things, Chad? It looks like all 5 drivers are about within 1.5 to 2 seconds of each other. Kurt Moss will now have to take offense and turn it into defense as Estefano Barrera is closing down the gap on him. Kurt Moss there just losing out a bit, dropping back from Velez, which now allows Velez to turn up the heat behind Mark Anthony Eaton. Mark no longer has a free reign of this race. He knows that Velez, who now has a bit of clear air behind him, a bit of space behind him, will be setting his sights forward on the back of that Lancer to turn it into clear air to take that 1st position.
Absolutely, and the more fighting that happens is the more this race will stay close, because like we said, there is not much room for error around here, so you're going to want to play it as safe as you possibly can whilst keeping ahead of the competition or trying to attack the competition. But certainly it's going to create some compromising dare I say corner entries when we start to go 2 by 2 into some of these corners. There is not much separating the top 5 at the moment. Mark Anthony Eaton with a second to Luis Daniel Velez, who also has a second to Kurt Moss, but behind Kurt Moss, Estefano Barrera is certainly looking to get involved in this fight. The drivers all doing high 124s, low 125s. You were saying, Kale.
Estefano Barrera now having had a bit of misluck or misfortune rather at the start of the race, has it all to do now, but he is in striking distance. Kurt Moss directly in front of him. Who is that? Stephen Pommels just making contact there in turn 3 on the exit. This is going to play directly into the hands of Jaden Harrison, who will be looking into damage mitigation here.
And
to close down the gap
up the road.
Stephen Pommels, he can see him right there. Stephen Pommels now will have a lot more work to do, a lot more anxiety in that Lancer cockpit there, as he knows that Jaden Harrison has been on a charge ever since. He has been taking fastest lap after fastest lap. Jaden Harrison is not messing about at all. But speaking of 2 by 2, we have seen Kurt try to do it to Velez into the second corner, but it's not doing at all. Kurt here now right up behind Velez, heading around the final corner. He's going to have the entirety of the Bridgestone straight to make that overtake work. He's sitting nicely in the slipstream. Will it be enough as they come around the first corner, heading into the second corner, the heavy braking zone? Kurt Moss, will he try the outside again, or will he dive to the inside to move this Lancer out of the way? He shifts the car over to the outside, but Velez there parking the car, making it as wide as possible. Velez going just a bit deep. Estefano Barrera now looking to gain on Kurt Moss, but nothing doing there. It's the status quo remains. Mark Anthony ahead of Luis Daniel Velez, Kurt Moss in third, and Estefano Barrera in fourth.
I mean, these drivers are trying everything to gain that position, but Luis Daniel Velez playing it very smart into turn 2 there, just parking his car on the inside, knowing full well that the track is too narrow through turn 3 to make anything happen if you keep your line tight enough. So certainly positioning his car the best way possible to keep ahead of the competition. But I mean, Kurt Moss must be getting frustrated now, and it's in times like these where you expect or you hope that a driver keeps a cool head, because the frustration could be mounting, knowing full well that Estefana Barrera is right there waiting for the mistake to pounce upon. So you want to get the move done, as I'm sure Kurt Moss looks to have some pace in hand behind Luis Daniel Velez, but can't show that pace whilst he is caught up trying to find a way by. And as we continue throughout this race, if I don't know, this is, I see what you mean now, Kale, in terms of the difficulty in overtaking around here. If you know where to park your car, certainly you are a-okay in keeping ahead of the competition without any rash dive bombs or any kind of aggressive moves. And maybe Kurt Moss will have to start thinking about how to get Daniel Velez out of position in order to make the move before he comes under attack from Estefana Barrera. He's almost pushing Velez through that corner there, as you could see them one after the other. You were saying, Kale.
It looked as though Kurt was about to go for a dive bomb heading into turn 6. That would have been a first from Kurt Moss, usually the cleanest of the pack. But I think this is going to be almost a race of attrition, barring any catastrophe, as there's contact between Kurt Moss and Luis Daniel Velez, and that's Daniel Velez in the wall. Kurt Moss there is going to feel as though he's responsible for that contact there, that accident, but decides to move on. I was about to say, barring any catastrophe,
he is waiting.
It's going to be whoever can keep it clean.
Absolutely, and he is waiting on Velez, but he's also going to come under attack from Jaden Harrison, it seems, who is right back into the equation now, as he lets Daniel Velez go, or he's trying to anyway, but Daniel Velez not coming through quick enough. And I'm not sure if Velez is trying to play that in a way that allows Jaden Harrison to get into the mix. But Kurt Moss has maintained that position for now. Oh no, and some contact there made with the wall, and this is all unraveling here this evening. Jaden Harrison has found himself in third position after his third start. I mean, this is crazy.
Oh my goodness, Jaden Harrison has been racing himself, and all of a sudden, after dispatching Stephen Pommels, finds himself in third position back on the podium, as Luis Daniel Velez finds himself in the barrier, the walls snatching up victims left, right, and center. They will surely be driving with a load of damage now, unable to push as fast as possible. Daniel Velez now, even with, I think that's his steering is now shifted. His car is, either he retires that car or he gets it fixed, which would be heaven sent for Stephen Pommels and Kimani Eastman. That's one more position for them, but Kimani Eastman still struggling to get past the BMW of Rahul Nasir, who is still sitting in the front in his class in first position. Roger Robinson back up into second place, but 52 seconds, is it? No, sorry, 12 seconds behind Rahul Nasir. So the BMW drivers racing the Lancer Cup class really right now as it stands, as we see them coming around the final corner. And Chad, this is exactly why the Lancer Cup class car has more downforce and can carry much more speed through the corners, but the BMW has a higher top speed actually. But It's all about where the speed matters, and it's in the corners.
Definitely, and Kimani Eastman there will be under pressure down the straights from Rahul Nazir. But Daniel Velez now, just having taken a pit stop to, I assume, repair some of the damage to his car, will rejoin behind both Rahul Nazir and Roger Robinson. And that's going to be some work for him to do here, coming out behind the BMW class. I'm sure a few other drivers may take pit stops, as we saw last week. I don't think the tires will make it to the end of 40 minutes, particularly not around a track as demanding as this one. But all the
However,
while, uh-huh.
I was gonna say I don't agree there. I think the driver is I think Mark Anthony Eaton is gonna stay right there out on track for the rest of this race. Remember last time out at VIR, there were plenty of overtaking opportunities and slipstreaming down into the first corner. He was constantly under pressure from the likes of Jaden Harrison and decided to try the alternative strategy and take a pit stop, and his gamble worked out extremely well for him.
Well,
However,
Kale, we're
here around Long Beach Circuit, I don't think that there's enough overtaking opportunities to warrant a pit stop. I think he may stay out.
well, that's a fair assessment, but I will say now we are at the stage of the race where things get interesting, as we saw the top two there lapping the first of the BMW, well, the last of the BMW runners, and this is now where things are gonna get tight because Estefano Barrera now 0.6 of a second behind Mark Anthony Eaton, and that is gonna lend itself to some drama as they're approaching car number 10, which should be Nicholas Donald, around the last corner there, going down start finish, the stretch. I can't call it a straight because there's certainly a corner within it, but as they're going down the stretch, they will be coming up to more and more lap cars as we progress through the next 20 minutes, and that is going to create some drama, I think, for the drivers to navigate lapping these cars whilst maintaining track position, and for the drivers behind, maybe this is the chance to mount the attack when drivers are being held up or having to navigate through the lapped traffic. You can see Nicholas Donald there up ahead of these two drivers. Or is that Davil Park? I'm not entirely sure. That might be Davil Park there, as they might have already lapped Nicholas Donald, who is the last of the runners. So yeah, we will observe how this all unfolds, that the gap fluctuating between 0.8 and about 1.2 seconds. So as they are approaching more and more lapped cars, we will watch how that unfolds. Jaden Harrison behind might be hoping for some carnage here. Well, not carnage, but at least a little bit of mix-up, as that looked like Davil Park diving out of the way of the two lead cars and causing himself some grief there behind is Davil Park, having made some contact with the wall after letting these guys by. And that's what's going to be problematic, right? Because when you start to think about lapping these cars or letting the cars by, you could end up costing yourself in the process.
And that's exactly what we saw happen there with Davil Park. And getting back on the topic of strategy, Chad, Jaden Harrison, having been racing himself for majority of this race thus far, he will not have as significant tire wear as the likes of Estefano Barrera, Kurt Moss, and Mark Anthony Eaton. Mark will be watching that gap between himself and Jaden. It was 10 seconds, now 11 seconds, but the gap is fairly stable. If Mark were to pit, he would be giving up that all-essential track position, and Jaden, who is now currently sitting on better tires, would have all the choice in the world whether to pit or not. It would be basically giving up certainty for uncertainty, Chad. And I'm looking forward to see if there's going to be any pit stops here. If we were going to see a pit stop, I think we would see it from either Stephen Pommels or Kurt Moss to fight over the remaining positions there, 4th, 5th, and 6th. But in the top 3, I doubt we're going to see anyone going into the pits. Yeah. I doubt it. Mark is seeming to manage this gap fairly well. Having done a 125.2, Estefano doing a 125.5 there last time around. It seems as though if he can just keep his laps consistent and mistake-free, this may be a lonely drive for Mark as he heads to the checkered flag.
Well, I wouldn't call it lonely. He certainly had company, but a very managed, calculated drive. I'll give him that.
Absolutely.
Seems to be managing well, keeping some life in the tires. Just maybe, as you might be right. I don't think a pit stop is wise here because certainly track position is all important around this circuit. So you could be very correct in that assessment, and as thus Mark Anthony Eaton has been managed, because I don't see where he's been putting in blistering lap times, and maybe the drivers behind also managing, because they don't seem to be doing the times we saw in qualifying either. So certainly a little bit more reserved or conservative on the tires here, even though we do see those lockups quite frequently, but I don't think that can be avoided given the nature of the car. So it's just to do your best to try and keep as much life in the tires as possible. With 15 minutes to go, I think if we were to see any pit stops, we would have seen them already. So certainly at this stage of the game, it is all about management and just to keep it going.
Speaking of management, Chad, Rahul Nasir managing that around roughly 10 to 11 second gap between himself and Roger Robinson. Robinson, who was earlier on the business end of an absolutely catastrophic accident involving himself and Kimani Eastman coming around the final corner, but managing to dig himself out of that hole back up into second position where he had started this race. Nabil Park a lap down on the top drivers in third, but it's still a podium position there. And Nicholas Donald rounding out the entire grid, 10 out of 10, sitting in fourth position in the M2 class. It seems as though all of the drivers in both classes are just settling down into their race now, just trying to bring the tires, bring the car home, and minimize the mistakes they make. As we saw both drivers from both classes, locking up heading into and out of corners. So it's all going to be about who's going to have that extra bit of tire wear to play with come the end of the race, as we see Rahul Nasir here going through the second corner all by himself,
Absolutely.
but keeping one eye on that gap.
I was gonna say, if you want to talk about lonely drives, this man right here has had a very lonely afternoon. He's had Lancer Cup drivers come by on occasion, but that was more drivers trying to get back into position as opposed to lapping him. But he's running a very lonely race here this evening in terms of his class. 8 seconds now clear of Roger Robinson. Roger Robinson seems to be closing that gap slightly. We will keep an eye on that, but for the most part, he has been in control of his race and has certainly done the best he can to keep himself out of trouble, and so far so good for Rahul Nasir, managing the gap to Roger Robinson for the top spot in the M2 class. All the while, Mark Anthony Eaton doing the same, but in completely different circumstances, with Estefano Barrera just hovering behind him to try and keep him honest, making sure that he is not too comfortable out front to just put in those lap times as he sees fit. He has to keep the pace up ever so slightly to just manage that gap to Barrera, and maybe this is Barrera conserving a little bit to try and mount an attack come the end of the race. But Jaden Harrison is still closing up to the front too, not by a rate that would put him into contention barring incident. So I think Jaden Harrison might have to settle for third here this evening with 13 minutes to go in this race. After that lap 1 incident, which I think, all things considered, he might appreciate the fact that he ends up in third given how his race started on lap 1.
As a matter of fact, Chad, it looks as though Estefano Barrera is, I don't want to say that Jane is closing it down on him, but he doesn't seem to be able to keep up the pace that he once was. Now almost 3 seconds behind Mark Anthony there through the first couple of corners. Estefano probably feeling the effects of trying to stay with him in the wake of that Lancer Cup car there for the past 18 laps almost. Yeah. Jaden Harrison now only 4, 5, 6 seconds behind Estefano Barrera. Anything, never say never, Chad. Anything could happen towards the end of this race. We have just over 10 minutes to go, as we saw there with Jay Robinson setting the fastest time in his class at 1:27.4. Roger Robinson means business and is definitely going to be chasing down Rahul Nasir for the remainder of this race.
Absolutely, his last lap a 1:28.1, but best overall time for him in his class a 1:27.4, and maybe just trying to see if he could mount an attack on Rahul Nazir, but that gap still roughly 7-ish seconds actually, and it is closing, but I'm not sure if it's closing fast enough for him to find himself in contention with Rahul Nazir here this evening. We continue to watch for the budding rivalry between those two drivers in their class, but this Roger might just have to chalk this one up for today, as Rahul Nazir having the better on-track luck and just overall management of his own race. But we are still on board with Mark Anthony Eaton, the lead car, and he is actually, you are right, that gap is opening up quite nicely to Estefano Barrera in second. We almost couldn't see Estefano in the rearview mirror in that onboard shot for quite some time there through turn 7, as they're now going through turn 9. Well, Mark is anyway going through turn 9 into turn 10. And as we are just about at the 10-minute mark with 10 minutes to go, Jaden Harrison in third, still about 6 seconds behind Estefano Barrera. He is
Just saw
closing
him
though.
there at the edge of the shots.
Absolutely, he is closing because the gap to Mark is coming down, even though it is, even though the Estefano is not at the moment with Mark Anthony Eaton. So certainly he might find himself under some pressure by the end of the race from Jaden Harrison if Jaden can manage to keep his pace at what it is now.
And Chad, the race leader, Mark Anthony Eaton's best time was a 1:24.8. Jaden Harrison's last time was a 1:24.8. So Jaden, they're definitely pushing himself to the limit. We may even see him dip possibly back down into the 23s. I've seen him do it before. Let's see if he can fight for that second position as he's getting closer and closer to Estefano Barrera.
Does he have the tire life to do that though? That is, ooh, and there's some contact.
No.
He was making, as we saw him at the edge of the shot there, he made some contact at turn 7, and that is certainly not going to help his comeback efforts here this evening. Maybe trying to push just a little too hard, as we were talking about his chances of making it back into the podium positions, and that has cost him 2 seconds to Estefano Barrera. So now he has an 8-second gap to close with 8 minutes to go in this race.
It's looking a bit of an unsurmountable task for Jaden Harrison, but we will keep an eye on the top 3 there as this race comes down to its dying moments here. Just 8 minutes, as you rightfully say, Chad. 8 minutes left in this race here, and Mark seems to be just managing this gap. He's going to be taking care of those tires. He's not going to be pushing as much. Keeping a bit of a distance, a bit of social distancing from the walls there to ensure that he doesn't get grabbed up by one of them, as we have seen multiple times during this race. Estefano Barrera can't really do much apart from watch that Lancer that Mark is so expertly piloting move off into the distance, as he has to be thinking about Jaden Harrison as well behind. And it's not just about this one battle, but the bigger war that is developing between these drivers. I don't even think there's just one or two rivalries here. I think Mark Anthony, Kurt Moss, Jaden Harrison, Estefano Barrera, and a lot of the times even Stephen Pommels are all in one mixing pot here. We saw the drivers separated by second at the end of qualifying, as Kurt Moss here has caught up to Stephen Pommels coming into turn 9. Kurt Moss on the outside. The outside will turn to the inside for the final corner, but Kurt Moss thinks better of it. But Stephen Pommels left the gap, and Kurt Moss takes 4th position from Stephen Pommels. But we still have to run down to the Bridgestone corner, the first corner, the right-hand kink, as we head down the no straight heading into the second corner. Stephen Pommels will have a bit of slipstream, and the inside, he switches back to the outside. Now dives back down the inside on Kurt Moss. Kurt Moss leaves a bit of space, and Stephen Pommels forces his way through the gap that Kurt Moss has left and now takes back that fourth position. It's all
My
going on back
goodness.
here, fighting for fourth position.
That was a fight. Kurt Moss getting the advantage there out of turn 10 and left the door open. I thought he was diving for the inside line there into turn 2, but he thought better of it, maybe thinking that he had the move done. But Stephen Pommels had other ideas and certainly stuck a nose in and made it work. Kurt Moss now has to rethink that approach as they are still nip and tuck going through the back straight here down to turn 8, and Kurt Moss will be thinking, okay, I made a miscalculation there last time, so let me see if I can correct that error. And again tries to take the inside line there from Stephen Pommels, and they are side by side on the run down through the start finish stretch. And Stephen Pommels will keep the inside line side by side still all the way down the straight. And at turn 2, Stephen Pommels pulls ahead and outbreaks himself.
They're pulling out a trick out of the bag, forcing Stephen Pommels to. He forces him to take the inside. He's not used to that line, and as you said, Chad. Sorry to cut you. Outbraked himself. Kurt Moss there showing that it's not all about dives and switchbacks, but sometimes just distracting your opponent. Stephen Pommels would definitely have been looking at where Kurt's car is instead of looking at his braking marker, and that right there is the reason why Kurt Moss is so frequently referred to as Kurt Moss Stophead, as he's not just fast, but he has the mentals to be fast. And it's not just talent, but you have to be able to get and fight mentally on the track, Chad.
Absolutely. Cunning old fox there, Kurt Moss holds that line quite nicely and cause Stephen Pommels to make a mistake there. Kurt Moss now retakes 4th position, and dare I say, that might be as far as he will get. So, I mean, maximizing the result here this evening, given all the circumstances, to take that position from Stephen Pommels. Now runs in 4th, 22 seconds behind Jaden Harrison up ahead, and Jaden Harrison is once again closing that gap to Estefano Barrera. It is back down to 5 seconds, but will he have time to make that move happen? And I think what might be happening here is these drivers are once again finding themselves in position to lap these BMW drivers, and that might be what has caused the gap to narrow as much as it did as they were lapping what looks to be, I think that was Roger Robinson has been lapped. And oh my goodness, that is Roger Robinson having a moment and causing an incident with Jaden Harrison, and that will now cause him to drop away in this battle. And Jaden Harrison, there is still some contact going on. I'm not sure what's going on there with Jaden and these drivers.
It looks as though Jaden there just conceding himself, wrapping up his race, and I think he's going to just have to take that 3rd position now. All his hard work has been undone now, I think 2 or 3 times in the last 15 minutes of this race alone. He has been absolutely pushing and trying, brought that gap down to 5 seconds after losing the lead on the first lap. A disaster into turn 7. Jaden Harrison tries as he might, unable to get it done this time around, but a valiant effort from him. And speaking of valiant efforts, Mark Anthony Eaton still maintaining that gap, having been a heat sink for pressure this afternoon here around Long Beach Grand Prix circuit. Mark Anthony Eaton has led, I believe, 24 of the 25 laps that we have run so far. An excellent drive from Eaton as he comes around the final corner, just under 2 minutes to go plus 1 lap. It looks like this one's all sewn up for Mark, But let's see what happens
Well,
as we come down.
dare I say that was a bold statement, Kale, as it is never over till the fat lady sings. But certainly he has looked in complete control of this race here this evening, managing the gap to all drivers behind. It's not been one. There have been several that have tried to take the fight to him here this evening, but he has taken all the pressure time after time and has warded it off and maintained his lead of this race. And the gap has always looked just comfortable enough for him to say, okay, I can breathe a little bit, but he's kept on his toes. He's managed the gap nicely. He's just been in complete control for almost the entirety of this race.
Speaking of gap, Chad, Rahul Nasir, they're having a bit of contact with the environment that will allow Rajay Robinson to close in. Rajay, who is now on a personal best lap, I think, half a second almost up on his previous lap time. Rajay Robinson not resting until it's over. Still, the gap between them is about 17 seconds, so not quite gonna be enough time for Rajay Robinson to bring the pressure to Rahul Nasir in the dying moments of this race here. Just about done now with one more lap to go. The BMW car seems to be a little bit scanty. Rahul Nasir still sitting in first position, followed by Rajay Robinson, Davil Park in third, and Nicholas Donald in fourth. It seems as though the leaves have fallen on the water and they may stay exactly where they are. Boy, I am. How has this race been for you, Chad?
There's been action up and down the field, and there's been gaps to watch and things to pay attention to. Everybody's been kind of giving you a show here and there at different points of the race. But we are on the penultimate lap with Mr. Mark Anthony Eaton leading the way as he is now going through turn 7. And there will be one lap to go when he crosses start-finish line. That gap now 2.3 behind has come down slightly, but I don't think there will be enough in it for Estefano Barrero to close to Mark Anthony Eaton here this evening. He's just looked in complete control of this race since inheriting the lead on lap 1. He has not looked back. He has done the job that he was assigned here this evening to bring this car home on the top spot. And as he starts the final lap, 2.5 seconds ahead of Estefano Barrero, as long as he keeps it clean, he should be in for a victory. Stephen Pommels has once again made contact with the environment, and that gives Kimani Eastman a slight chance to have a look in the door, but just a little too far back to take advantage. Kimani Eastman has had a rather rough race here this evening, but as we are now coming to the end of Sector 1 for Mark Anthony Eaton, 2.6 seconds ahead of Estefano Barrero. He has but 4 corners to go in order to seal his victory here this evening, as he is now going through turn 7. And again, it's just been a brilliantly controlled race for Mark Anthony Eaton here this evening. And we will see him take the checkered flag in 3 corners, 2 to go as he comes through turn 8 and turn 9. 1 corner to go, and we will have the victory assured for Mark Anthony Eaton here this evening. Estefano Barrero tried on several occasions, as Jaden Harrison has had another incident and has fallen back behind Kurt Moss, and Kurt Moss has now inherited 3rd position. But Mark Anthony Eaton takes the victory away from Estefano Barrero. Kurt Moss will come home in 3rd. Not sure what happened there with Jaden Harrison, who now runs down in 4th position. He's been his own worst enemy here this evening. But Mark Anthony Eaton with the victory. Estefano Barrero to take 2nd. Kurt Moss comes home in 3rd, and Jaden Harrison will be happy to see the end of this race and the end of Long Beach here this evening. And he has disconnected as soon as he crossed the line Not sure if that was intentional or not, but he must be absolutely livid with himself here this evening. Stephen Pommels will come home to take fifth. And let's not forget the BMW class. Raul Nazaire takes the victory here for himself this evening and is doing donuts there down at turn 2. Roger Robinson will cross the line to take second position in their class, followed by Davil Park and Nicholas Donald to round us out. But my goodness, that was a race. Certainly we got action up and down the field, and once again, just a brilliant drive from Mark Anthony Eaton. Once again on the top step of the podium, Stella has indeed got his groove back, and he will be certainly celebrating that victory here this evening.
And as you were rightfully saying, Raul Nazaire, they're celebrating his, I believe, his second win in the BMW N2 class there, celebrating in true Californian style with the donuts at the second corner runoff area there. A fantastic drive from all the drivers here. It's a bit of a reverse of last time out of VIR, where the action really came down to the wire towards the second half of the race. This time around, all the action happened right at the start. Disaster for Jaden Harrison, managed to turn it around into the drive of an era, but unfortunately, a few too many mistakes here and there sees him losing out on a podium spot, finishing in third position. Stephen Pommels there managing to bring it home 3 seconds ahead of Kimani Eastman. He seems to have been struggling there towards the end, but your finishing order is Mark Anthony Eaton, Estefano Barrera, Kurt Moss, Jaden Harrison, Stephen Pommels, and Kimani Eastman in the Lancer Cup class. For the BMW class, we have Rahul Nazaire, Roger Robinson, Davil Park, and Nicholas Donald.
Absolutely, and we will be talking to the podium finishers, starting with the alien himself having a bit of a rough race here this evening. Mr. Kurt Moss, are you with us?
What up?
Mr. Moss, that was an eventful race, was it not?
Tell me about it.
Well, I'm actually looking for your insight on the matter, sir. Please fill us in on what took place here this evening.
Well, first incident with when Jaden crashed, that was nobody's fault. That's just a part of racing. But I was battling with, I think Louis, his name is, for a minute, but he kept moving in the braking zone, making 2 moves. So the second one, I don't know why I even stopped. I'm too kind sometimes, but he moved twice and I hit him, and I kind of lost it after that.
Okay, rather unfortunate, but I think at that point, given that you waited for him after that contact, you found yourself way down the order, not where you would have anticipated being coming out of that incident, but then still managed to get third position back. So overall, how would you assess the race at hand?
Well, in spite of the incidents, I'm happy with the result. Third place is always good. We wish it was first place, but yeah, as I said, in spite of it, it's a good result nonetheless.
Absolutely, and I think I'd have to get the official point standings, but given that Estefano Barrera once again finishes ahead of you, I think you are either in second or third. I'm not sure if the victory from Mark puts you in third overall in this championship, but certainly a bit of work to do for the final round of the competition. Do you still think you can pull out the victory in the championship?
I don't even think I'll be racing next week because I have work.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah, so I might not be making next week. So,
well, nonetheless, it's always great to have you in our events. You certainly bring a gold standard in terms of your racecraft. So, that's actually the move on Stephen Pommels. I mean, That one just seemed like a little bit of cunning was involved there.
Well, I know how he drives, so I had to kind of psych him out, and he kind of took the bait. So
Oh yes, well that was a brilliant move to watch. So certainly congratulations to you again, Kurt, on taking that third position.
respect, bro, and thanks as always for putting on this these events. See you next
Absolutely.
time.
Yeah, man, cool. And that was Kurt Moss, or third place finisher here this evening. I don't think Estefano Barrero is available to be spoken to at the moment. So we will take our race winner, Mr. Mark Anthony Eaton. Mark, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Well, that was a very controlled drive from you all evening. Talk us through your race here this evening.
I don't know what to start. Qualifying could have been better, but with a track like this, qualifying don't really make that much of a difference if you can't keep it out of the walls. So kind of just took the first lap cautious, and when I saw Jaden tighten up the first corner, I was like, yeah, that's gonna be a crash. So I backed out, kind of made my way through the carnage. And from there it was just managing my race with Faith Book and Pixie Dust. So yeah.
Absolutely, and a well-managed race overall from you. Did you feel the tire life fading at any point in time? Talk us through how things played out overall.
Uh, with tire wear, with the order that kind of panned out after the restart, with Luis in second, um, I knew I had a little bit more pace on him, so it was more of just managing the gap towards him and taking care of the tires. Because I knew that it's a really difficult track to pass on. So unless you're going to just chuck it up the inside of a corner, it's you can kind of hold the position and be safe. So it's kind of using Luis as a buffer between me and Kurt and Estefano, which worked to my advantage.
Absolutely, and yeah, the overall just a brilliantly managed race. Certainly now I think you might be sitting in P2 in this championship, with one round I believe to go. So will you be looking to 2 rounds to go? My apologies. I think I'm missing a round, but yeah. So you now have P2 in the championship with that victory, and the driver ahead of you is Estefano Barrero, who you seem to have the measure of for majority of this race once he had gotten by Luis Daniel Velez. What are your thoughts on that potential battle for the championship victory?
I'm just taking it one race at a time. I'm not really looking at this race as a precedence for further races. One thing to note is when you're battling, the tire wear does get a lot worse. So him battling, trying to get by Kurt and trying to get around Luis did help me because his tires were worn down. So I'm very sure if the roles were reversed in the next race, I'm sure it's gonna be a different story. But I'm gonna just take it a race at a time and hope for the best at this point.
Well, that's a good outlook, and I do appreciate the honesty there. So certainly best of luck to you in the remaining 2 rounds, and we look for more great drives like the one you had today.
Thank you.
All right, good talking to you. That was Mr. Mark Anthony Eaton, our race winner here this evening. And we will now be talking to the drivers from the M2 class, starting with our third place finisher, Mr. Davil Park. Davil, can you hear me? Davil, you with me? Not hearing from Davil at the moment, so if anything, we can come back to him, but instead I will take Mr. Roger Robinson, who finished in second position. Roger, are you with me? Roger?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Well, Congratulations on P2, but I'm sure that feels kind of hollow given how your race unfolded. Talk to us about how that all played out.
Yeah, you are right on point. I I'm a bit disappointed with the pace that I had. Um, it started with quali, as I said before. I think at quali I was on a 1:27.3 lap, and right at the final corner onto the straight, I hit the wall, and it killed the entire lap.
Yeah, I did take note of that. That was an unfortunate turn of events because that lap did look on pace to be right at the top of the timing sheets.
And after I'm saying, okay, second place, I can manage to pull this off. Unfortunately, I was involved in the Lancer pile-up, which set me back a bit quite far back of the pack. I think at that time it was like he was ahead by about 17 seconds. So I'm saying, okay, let's go. Let's do road. And, one lap at a time, I took it down to 7 seconds. And again, the Lancer class came upon me and, unfortunate events. And, towards the end, I just settled with the P2.
Yeah, rather unfortunate. It did look like you had the pace to challenge for that victory, but it all didn't unfold the way one would have hoped. But certainly with 2 rounds to go, I think you are firmly in P2 in this championship. And with Raul Nazer ahead of you, any strategies or anything to kind of figure out how you're going to take the fight to him in the remaining 2 rounds?
It depends on the track. If it's a track that suits my driving style, then I'll surely be dominant, or try to be dominant. I'll try to get the championship. But if not, Raul is a great competitor, and let's see how it goes. And I want to make mention of Jaden. I want to apologize to Jaden for that mistake. Yeah. But yeah, let's see how the championship unfolds. I'll try my best.
Absolutely, and I do appreciate the class you're showing there with that incident with you and Jaden. Yeah, certainly an unfortunate sequence of events, but that's part of racing, and we just hold your head up and we keep it pushing on to the next song.
All right, thank you.
All right, Roger, congratulations again, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, no problem. Thank you.
And onwards to the man himself, Mr. Rahul Nazer, taking the top step once more in his class. Rahul, are you hearing me?
Yep.
Well, congratulations once again, sir. Finding yourself once more on the top step of the podium. A good controlled race from you. Talk us through the sequence of events.
Yeah, well, very happy to get my first win here. Long awaited. Overall, the race was really nice. I was able to snatch that pole position, which I was very surprised by. But of course, even though that's half the job done, Long Beach it's a different animal, and so it was all about survival out there. And until the first caution, I was like, oh, it's gonna be one of those races. But luckily, it wasn't. But yeah, when that first caution did happen, I think at the end, Roger did mention it, that whole pileup at the last corner. I took out the front bumper of my car just a little bit, and then going into turn 1, damaged it a little bit more. From there, it was more of just limping the car home because the car just did not turn in as much. Overall, though, I was able to open up the gap, but then just the tires it's very difficult to warm them up. So it was very difficult to keep the car in one piece. Like, I'm always just sliding almost all the time, pushing the car, really trying to open up this gap because Roger was just picking closer and closer and closer. Got to a point where it was like 6-7 seconds. I was like, all right, well, it's time for war these last couple of laps. I'm ready. And then the gap just went from 7 to 17, and I was like, oh, I promise I didn't pay the Lancer class any money, but I'll gladly take that P1. But yeah, no, our fight is gonna happen one day, and it's gonna produce fireworks. I
Oh,
can't wait for that. But
I'm
I will
sure it
gladly take
will.
this win to tie this up.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure it will, because that was certainly a battle that would have been brewing at the time. But yeah, overall, it seemed you had quite a lonely afternoon there, well, evening there, driving by yourself for most of it. But it sounds like you were observing the gaps and managing. So how did that play out in terms of keeping the tires alive and trying not to take too much out of them whilst maintaining the gap to the drivers behind?
Well, yeah, most importantly, as much as I want to focus on my driving, I'm always looking at the numbers on the side. As much as you can have a lonely race, the numbers are so important. Watching what the guy behind you is doing, even watching what the guy ahead of you is doing. If I'm gaining on a Lancer, I'll gladly take a free position for the.
So sorry, I missed a part of that, Rahul. Are you still there? Rahul, I'm not hearing you anymore. I don't know if you got disconnected or what may have just happened.
You got to deal with it, and you just got to drive. And luckily, I was able to come out with that win, and it really sets us up for a good championship. Now being tied for first, I believe. And yeah, with 2 rounds to go, it's going to be a hard fight. That's for sure. He's a very quick driver, but hey, 24 hours ago, I said in quote, "We'll be back tomorrow to rightfully take my place at the top step of the podium at Long Beach," winking emoji. And I think I did that well. I'm not going to predict the future though. That I don't know what's going to be happening over there. Those tracks I don't think I've driven as much. So yeah, it's going to be a new experience for me. And yeah, we're going to see how we do in this series.
Okay, I think you got disconnected for a moment, so we did miss some of that, but we got the general gist of it, and we are looking forward to the remainder of that battle between yourself and Roger, because it looks like it could get heated. So certainly keep the energy up. We do love that you are bringing that competitive fire to this competition, and we're glad to have you. And once again, congratulations on taking the top step today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And yeah, shout out to you guys. I love everything that's going on right here. Love the competition. Let's keep it up. Let's see where this goes.
Appreciate it. All right. Okay, and that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes our interviews with the drivers who topped their respective classes. And certainly you heard that there are budding rivalries and continued competition between some of these rivals. So yeah, certainly look forward to what is to come in the remaining 2 rounds. And we do thank you as always for tuning in here with us at the JSRA for our Chase for Pace series. Yeah, 2 rounds to go. Certainly some action to come your way, and we appreciate you being here with us for the journey. So thank you once again for tuning in this evening, and we will see you next time.